Welcome to the Dunamis EQ podcast, where we talk to leaders who lead with great emotional intelligence, hear their stories, learn from their journeys, and just really get inspired about how we can learn how to lead with emotional intelligence. Today, I have the honor of Nico being part of the podcast. Hello, Nico.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on. I think this is going to be a very vulnerable podcast. So, guys, get ready to hear about Nico's amazing, inspiring journey. So, Nico, tell us a bit about your story. So, my last guest, or one of my previous guests, because these are released out of order. So, one of my previous guests, he had a really great question about tell me your story from birth to being here in this podcast recording. So it's quite a big it's quite a big ask, but yeah, please take it away. Tell us about your story.
It's like in a job interview where they say, "Tell me a bit about yourself," and you start where you were born, and like, no, that's not what I meant.
Not that far, no. But this one, we won't go back that far.
Exactly. I chuckled when you said, about the previous guest and starting where you were born. I was born in a little town called Bethlehem, which over Christmas makes a fantastic story because
Yeah.
Nico is shortened to Nick, Saint Nick for the Christmas. So it's really just a
Wow.
fun story over Christmas. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's not that Bethlehem. There are actually a number of Bethlehems across the world, as I found out. But
Oh,
I
really?
was born in Bethlehem in the Free State in South Africa. A
Okay.
Monday, I believe it was. So, so yeah, I grew up in a very small town. Um, there was very little opportunity to even leave the town, let alone go to other countries or live in other parts of the world. And as I look back to my life now, I'm I've got a better life than I had any right to expect when I was young and in primary school. So it's been quite an interesting journey, as you say. I attended primary school in Bethlehem in South Africa. Um, I have late diagnosed autism. I think I was only diagnosed with autism when I was 39, and
Wow.
obviously that autism has behavioral oddities that people don't often understand, but that a person with autism doesn't always understand unless they know
Mm.
that that's just how they're wired. So school was fair to say was a nightmare for me, but the library was a sanctuary. I loved the library. I was a library prefect, which I thought was a wonderful honor, but I was teased, by the kids that library prefect. But every break, every before school, every after school opportunity that I had, I spent in the library in primary
Mm.
school, and when we then moved towns when high school started. Um, then I was part of the high school library. I actually joined as a member of the high school's library and
Mm.
worked with the cataloging system, the indexing. And, I just spent most of my life hiding in the library. I think that's probably the most honest way to say it. Um, I do love books. I do love reading. I do love learning. Um, I remember one English essay we had to do. We had to do this verbal essay, and I'd forgotten about it completely. And I was sitting in the library on one Monday, and the kids all preparing their verbal essays, and I'm like, oh boy, what should I talk about? And I quickly memorized a few pieces about um, nuclear fission versus fusion, and I did this talk in first year high school and on Blackboard, and I'm drawing nuclear fission and fusion and calculations, and my teacher's like, can you next time just do a topic on something ordinary? But that was just the world I lived in. I had very few
Mm.
friends. Um, Not maybe for want of trying, but just because I didn't understand people that well. I
Mm.
think that's probably the
Mm.
big thing. I didn't understand other kids, why they behaved in certain ways. And with the benefit of hindsight, I realize now it's probably because I had autism and I struggled to find that common ground. Um,
Mm.
And I've often thought about, people give you this thought experiment where they say, if you could go back in your life in a time machine, what would you change? And I've often given that a considerable amount of thought, and I probably would not even want the opportunity. I wouldn't want to go
Really?
back. Yeah,
Why is that?
I've learned a lot. Um, Arguably, there's a great deal more to learn. I'm always conscious of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where one overestimates one's ability
Yeah.
compared to what it actually is. Um, but I think I've learned a lot, and given the struggles I've had and the challenges I've had, I don't know that I would want to go through those again or anything similar. So, yeah, um, primary school and high school were really, really hard. I was meant to be a fighter pilot. I love telling this story. It's just so exciting. Maybe someone can get some inspiration from this. When I started high school, I despised mathematics. I couldn't stand it. I remember, I remember in the end of primary school, I did so badly in a test. I got 25% or something. And the teacher said to us that
Wow.
we had to take this test to our parents to sign so that my parents know how badly I did. And so what does a normal thinking person do? You forge your dad's signature. Um, I had a previous signature of my dad's. Oh, wait, this
Yeah.
gets good. So I had a previous signature of my dad's, and I practiced it a first bit on some paper, and it came out reasonably well, I thought. And I then stenciled it out with some pencil very lightly, and completed the whole signature. And so the next day, the teacher called me up and she said she wants me to go to the principal and tell him if I think I signed the paper or my dad signed it. And the principal just laughed. In those days in South Africa, you could get hidings for things. So
Yeah.
I was mortally afraid of this. But the principal just ended up laughing because what had happened is um, I was so fixated on forging my dad's signature that I never thought that he wouldn't have signed it with an orange marker. It was this ridiculous signature of my dad's. But you know, yeah, I despised maths. I just couldn't get it, man. So
But you
my
became an
first year of high
analyst.
school, wow, right? I mean, what a wrong job for someone for. But here's the story. So at the end of my first year of high school, we were given the option to decide whether we wanted to pursue certain subjects or drop certain subjects. So I picked German and typing, which in those days carried a bit of a stigma, boys or the girls in the typing class. But I dropped mathematics because I despised it and I thought, I'm good to go without it. So I did high school, I did typing, spent onerous amounts of time with my computer. Found to my horror that computers work with maths, and that made life difficult in the old days of DOS. And then in my final year of high school, so this is 5 years on, 4.5 years on, whatever, I watched a movie called Cool Runnings. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's about the Jamaican bobsled team. And there's a scene in which one of the guys, I think Sanka, he talks about their dreams and their hopes, and they talk about you can achieve anything in life if you're willing to work hard enough to achieve it. And that was just so powerful for me. That just had such an impact on me. And I thought my life's dream was to become a fighter pilot. But to be a fighter pilot, you needed maths. So, March of my final school year, bearing in mind that the final exams start in around September, South Africa's school year runs from January to December. So, around
Okay.
September, the final exams start. Now we're in March. And I watched this Cool Runnings movie, and it just inspired me so much. And I went to my dad and I said to him, I'm going to study maths. I'm going to become a pilot. I went to the school the next day. I tell them this whole story, how inspired and excited I am. And they just laughed me out of the classroom. because effectively what I was proposing was that in my final school year, already with 7 subjects, I was proposing to add mathematics and study 5 years worth because I had to do the first year of high school again. So I had to do 5 years of trigonometry, algebra, and geometry. And nobody wanted to take me on. I went from person to person. I went to heads of mathematics and other schools. Everyone just said no. And there was one company in the town we lived that said, okay, we're a bit of a startup. We're trying to become a tutoring company, and let's see, if you can do it, then great. We'll put you in the paper, but if not, we'll disavow any knowledge. And I said, that's great. Um, and man, I worked and I studied mathematics, and I completed 5 years of mathematics in 6 months.
Wow.
And I passed. My dad unfortunately passed away 2 weeks before the final exam. And that was the time. Wow, that was the time. But despite that, I managed to pass all of my 8, 7, 8, whatever high school subjects, including maths. And yeah, that was just a really big success for me. I think that's important to take out here. The Air Force ultimately denied my entry because they did extensive psychometric testing, and apparently I was not aggressive enough to become a fighter pilot.
Oh, really?
Which sucked a bit, which I didn't agree with for the longest time. But I've come in life to see the truth in their words. If wasps come into my house, I carefully catch them in a glass and take them outside, and spiders and things, don't harm. So I'm vegetarian because I feel sorry for animals. So I think the
Yeah.
Air Force was probably right on that call. but I think it's a good lesson that the Jamaican bobsled team so very eloquently put, that if you want something enough and you're willing to work for it and you persevere through the difficult times, you can achieve it.
Mm.
So yeah, that was quite a formative time in life. Of course, as my dad passed away, I had to help work and help support my family, my mom and my sister. So I was not able to go to university. I did first year university because we had a tiny bit of money, but I studied computer ethics and computer design and so on, database basics and so on. But yeah, unfortunately, life just life sometimes kicks you in the teeth, and all the plans you have kind of fall by the wayside. And yeah, I got married quite early. My wife and I moved to Cape Town, where we stayed until we moved to the UK. But the time in Cape Town was quite interesting. I had a job there working with a college that specialized in working with students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So think a lot of students who live in desperately poor environments. Some of their parents or dads might be in jails and gangs. So it really was. There were a lot of people there who came with some terrible backstories, and that was a big turning point in my life. So up until now, if you think, I used to hide in the library in primary school and high school. I used to sort of seclude myself in my room as a teen, as a young person. And then I started this college, and these people come to my class. I teach them computers. I teach them how to build computers, build computer networks, etc. And it was a real eye opener. You suddenly work with people for whom one square meal a day is a luxury, and that's what they get. Um, and already there were some amazing success stories. I remember one guy. I won't say his surname, but his name was Jean-Claude. I hope if he maybe finds this in future that he realizes I still think fondly of him. He was a refugee out of Angola during the war there, and his parents and family were killed in some of the fighting, and a family in Cape Town took him in, and he ended up in my class, learning how to work with computers and stuff. And I spent so much time with him and with the others, but what was so rewarding was he called me 2 years after he finished college, and he invited me to come see his computer shop. So he
Mm.
had gone through this course, gone through the training, the weird life lessons that I tried to impart, he took on himself, and he started this computer shop, and it's still a thriving little shop there in Cape Town, and he's living a wonderful life. Um,
That's
and it
amazing.
was just it was interesting for me to see that one can have an impact on other people's lives. You can have a destructive impact. I think that's easily done.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
it takes a lot more energy and a lot more of yourself to be a positive influence.
Definitely.
But it's something I enjoy, and that for me has become my core belief, my core values in terms of being a leader is to build other people up, you know, not to bark orders,
Mm.
not to
Mm.
whatever, but to help other people achieve what they're wanting to achieve in life.
Definitely. So that's really what inspired me in terms of reaching out to have you on the podcast, because you and I worked together at Sky quite a few years
Mm.
back. I always remembered like having good interactions with you. People, I never really heard anyone say anything bad about you. People only really had good
I
things to
said,
say about you. But sorry.
I said, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, yeah. It was always really good feedback that I heard about you. But what really inspired me in terms of reaching out to you was some of the posts that you were making on LinkedIn about
Mm.
trying to support people, even in terms of if they're in looking for jobs, how can you help them with their CVs? How can you give them coaching on different things around leadership? And just seeing a lot of the posts that you were making and the impact that they were having on people was something that was really, really inspirational for me, and that was a big part of why I reached out to you.
Mm. Thank you. It's comforting to know that it's getting out there. Um, Not so much
Mm.
that it's noticed. That's not why I do it. Um, I lost my job, a job that I really loved with some of the most amazing, intelligent people I've ever worked with, towards the end of January this year. And that hit me hard, man. As someone with autism, I struggle to quantify things at times. I struggle to quantify, well, things like self-worth. My
Mm.
idea, my view on how I justify my worth to society is by my paycheck, by the tax that I pay.
Mm.
So when I no longer had a job, I arrived at the inevitable conclusion very quickly that I had no more value to society, and mentally, that's been a difficult place to be. And for
Mm.
full disclosure, um, I'm in a mental hospital at the moment. I've been sectioned under Section 2 of the Medical Mental Health Act, and so at the moment I'm in my first week of a at least month-long stay in a mental hospital. Um, it's been hard. I've got a back injury that I incurred in 2018, and the first month that I got a half-liter bottle of morphine was funny, because you don't hear of people getting morphine, and
Mm.
less like palliative care, end of life sort of thing. And the second month I got a half-liter bottle of morphine. It was funny, but a little bit less funny. And over 4.5 years, I've been through a number of liters of morphine. I get 1,200 tablets every day just to try and cope with this back injury that I've got. Combine that now with the fact that I no longer had a job, and ergo had no value to society, and well, in my estimation, no value to my family, because with my injured back, I can't do DIY stuff. I can't go build a fence or fix the deck or whatever. My mental health rapidly declined, and I'm not in this hospital today because I wanted help. But yeah, the doctors discovered me, and they've sectioned me, and I'm in hospital. And the first day that I got here, I told them that I want to leave. I want to appeal, which is hard if you're sectioned. You can come visit hospital voluntarily, but if you're sectioned, your liberties are restricted somewhat. And it's been tough. That first day, I told them that I want to appeal. The second day, our pastor from church came to visit me, and he challenged me a bit on being selfish, which he didn't quite say I'm selfish, but he kind of challenged some of my beliefs, especially around the fact that I only see my value to society by the size of my paycheck. And he suggested that's maybe an issue with pride, and I thought long and hard about that. And I think there's an element of truth to what he said. So over the last week in the hospital here, I've made some conscious efforts to not do like I did at school, where I hide in the library. So here, I hide in my room. But I go out, I sit with the patients. I've picked a chair that I've noticed that people don't often sit on, so I sit there. And I've made it a point to be a quiet space, a silent voice. And I thought I would just sit there, not with a phone or anything in my hands, but just be there in case someone wants to talk. And tears come to my eyes when I think of the interactions that I've had with people over the last week, who've been grateful for a quiet voice, for someone to just sit by, not necessarily talk, but just to sit. So, yeah, I've in this last week, I've probably learned more about leadership and about emotional intelligence than I've done in most of my life to date. It's been quite a learning curve.
Firstly, thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable, because it's really not easy, to be able to share something like this, because I feel like as a society we're definitely getting a lot better in terms of understanding, firstly, things like neurodiversity, autism, and the impact that has on people, but also in terms of we're really starting to lean in more into conversations about mental health. And so, it's not always easy to speak up as we're still in that transition to normalizing these conversations more, to being able to be open and say, look, actually, right now I'm not okay, or I'm recovering, or wherever you're actually at authentically, and to be able to have that conversation. So firstly, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for being willing to have this conversation and to be open about it, because especially right now, where we're in a world where a lot of people are going through what you mentioned in terms of in January about losing jobs that they love, losing jobs where a lot of identity can be built up into our jobs. So I used to be a semi-professional basketball player, and when I retired from playing, it was a very weird transition, right? Leaving and not being able to say, oh, I play basketball, like it had become such a part of my identity, but I chose to leave. So I can't even imagine, people who have been doing jobs for years, for decades, who it's not really their choice to leave, but it's a massive part of their identity that's being shaken.
Yeah, one of the ladies I've been working with, she'd been working at a company for 30 years and she lost the job.
Wow.
And yeah, that rocks your world a bit. But you mentioned about talking about mental health, and I wasn't sure it's the right call to talk about this during this call. You don't know who's going to see this in the future, but I felt that it's important to be authentic and open and honest. In fact, minutes before you and I started this call today, I saw a post on LinkedIn where someone's dad had taken his life, and
Wow.
everyone, all the family kept talking about the last time they saw him, he was smiling, and they photos of him smiling and being happy, and kind of no one saw it coming. And maybe that's why I need to be open and honest and vulnerable about this. And if there are other people out there, maybe you can walk through the valley of darkness and you can get out of it. So yeah.
Honestly, thank you so much for being willing to share. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, you mentioned about how you've learnt so much about leadership and emotional intelligence while you've been in the hospital. What does leadership and emotional intelligence mean to you, and what about that have you been learning while you've been in the hospital?
I'll unpack emotional intelligence in a minute, but for me, leadership is not the same as being a manager. I think a lot of people are managers. A lot of people can be good managers. I don't think everyone can be a good leader. And I think to be a good leader, one needs to have a sacrificial mindset. If you are entrusted with people's lives, you've got people working with you in a team, you are entrusted with their lives. And for me, leadership is about sacrificing your pride, your ego, your desires in order to build up other people. And that for me has been one of the biggest things in my entire career to date. I never sought out to be a leader. I never sought out to have a team report to me. It kind of happened, just like things happen. Suddenly one day we needed more work done, and we needed another analyst, and my manager didn't have the bandwidth, and so we employed another analyst, and she reported to me, and suddenly I had a team, and I had to make sure I look after my team well. And and yeah, so it's interesting when you're not out looking for it and it comes to you. You're needing to change and adjust your views in the world. But I think what has always served me well is my desire to serve other people, and that probably would be the single defining thing about my life. I would say, my purpose for being on this planet is to serve other people. And that for me is something that I could do through leadership.
Is it fair to say then that your definition of leadership is service?
Yes. Service and sacrifice. Yeah. It's easy. I've seen it done before where a team does a great piece of work, and the team's manager goes and presents it as his work or their work, whatever the team gets no credit. And I've always made sure, or at least as far as I can, consciously try to make sure that I credit my team with the success. And if there are any punches to come, I'll take the punches, but let my team have the success. And I think for me that is what leadership really is and should be, at least in my view.
And what about for emotional intelligence?
Emotional intelligence has been a difficult one for me to wrap my arms around. Like I said when we started talking, I've got autism, by nature, I am more interested in things than in people. I would I would much rather write 3,000 lines of code in SQL than trying to figure out arbitrate some argument that two people have. Um, but I think because of that, because I have autism, and because I'm aware of the fact that that is potentially a stumbling block for me, I spent a great deal of time studying people. I've studied a lot of philosophy. Um, I'm currently going through a bit of a Dostoevsky phase. Um, Dostoevsky's writing is really interesting. A lot of his work focuses on redemption, which is weird in the situations that he's got. But I've studied a lot of philosophy. I studied a lot of you know, just people and people's reactions. And I think for me, emotional intelligence. Someone once said Yoda in Star Wars is a great example of a good leader who has good emotional intelligence. And you're like, what? But if you think about the character, he has a deep sense of empathy and awareness of people's feelings and emotions. And I think that is especially important with emotional intelligence, is being aware of your feelings, but also other people's feelings, and being able to put yourself in their position and understanding, the world and the perspective that they come from. And then it's just about how you approach that, how you change your interactions with other people to help them, not to help yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I
that
could
makes perfect
probably
sense.
recite the 5 different key things, key identifiers of emotional intelligence, but really for me, I think a lot of it boils down to empathy. Sorry, you
And
wanted to say something.
so, what I'd love to understand a bit, yeah, what I'd love to understand a bit more about is kind of how neurodiversity and emotional intelligence, kind of how that works together. So, you mentioned a little bit about how autism affects, your behavior. So, what are some of the things that you've had to overcome as someone with autism in terms of learning how to have emotional intelligence?
When you watch Netflix or Amazon, you can put the subtitles down at the bottom of the screen. I have so often wished that someone would invent an autism translator and put that at the bottom of the screen. So when you see two characters looking at each other, it's like the autism translator, they're falling in love, or just this music is meant to make you sad. You must feel sad now, or
Yes.
feel happy now. um, I think that's probably the best way to describe my personal struggles with autism and understanding humans. If my car makes a certain noise, well, it doesn't make noises, but if a car were to make a certain noise, you'd know, oh, it's the wheel bearings, or oh, it's
Yes.
the discs that need, and it's they're simple, they're definable things that you can quantify. You can measure the brake pad and see, oh, it's only 1 millimeter, it should have been replaced, and those kind of things. And people are a lot more difficult to put a ruler against than to measure and to say, oh, this is what's happening. And um, my current stay in the hospital with other mental health patients, I think one of the things it's taught me is that people are enormously complex creatures, and there's a lot that goes on in a person's life that changes perspectives and changes how they react to things. um, and and all these things have really just been eye openers for me to try and understand how people react, why they react, etc. um, but also then, in as much as it impacts emotional intelligence, it's probably fair to say that when you and I were working at Sky, I think that was, gosh, 2012, 2011, something, I was there. Um, and I moved on to other companies, and I found myself often working with people, with managers who who were not great. Um, throw you under the bus, take credit for your work you've done. They'd sit in the board meeting and say, "Hey, I've done this," and you're thinking, "I coded that whole thing. I built that whole thing. You literally just presented my work as your own." And I think a lot of that opened my eyes to emotional intelligence, that it's a thing. Because as a child, obviously you do IQ tests in school and so on, and you score wherever you score an IQ test, and that's like the be all and end all of everything. So it was interesting for me when I started going through situations at work that were difficult, um, and realizing that emotional intelligence is a thing, and then trying to figure out how that fits in with managers. And I don't say this out of bitterness, but I've probably learned more about being a leader from my bad managers than I have from the good ones. I'm not sure that that's a completely fair statement to make, but I've learned a lot from the bad managers. I and this is what I was saying earlier about that I feel a leader should be sacrificial and in an act of service to their team. I know the sting of not getting credit for your work, of a promotional opportunity coming along and you be denied the promotion for whatever reasons. And that kind of dynamic that really makes people feel awful. And kind of that framed my career for me in a light that I wanted to change, to make change, and to help people change their lives and improve. And I suppose that sounds pretty cliched, but that really has been my goal in my career until now. Um,
And and I think it's in some ways it's quite sad that that's how you've had to learn those things. So, for example, I've been very blessed in having good managers to learn examples from. But I'm also a firm believer that both our good and our negative experiences show us things in different ways. So the good shows us this is how it should be done, and the bad, if in some ways we allow it to, and we can process it in a good way, it shows us how things shouldn't be done. And it's that kind of example that they give of sometimes kids who grow up in a house where the father's an alcoholic. One of them takes it as, well, that's just what I'm going to do. I've seen it's destructive, but I'm going to go that way. And there's another kid in that same household sees it as, now I know what to do. Now I know what not to do. And they take it in a totally different direction. So in a lot of ways, it really comes down to how we process those things and how we understand those things. So how do you feel, like, what do you feel helped you in having those experiences but turning them into something that you've learned what not to do, as opposed to something that's put you in a really bad place?
I've been fortunate to have some exceptional managers in my career, many of whom I still have contact with. And there are quite a few people that I text on a regular basis who were managers 10, 15 years ago that I thank for the foundation that they laid. That I credit for helping me to get someone in my team promoted because they showed me how it's done. I spoke about the bad managers, but I've got the good ones' numbers on my phone, and I fairly regularly text them and talk to them, and even if it's just a once in a year reflection and saying again, thank you for that groundwork that you laid. I think I suppose it's really how how you take it, but for me, my key thing has always been to try and just make a change to one person's life. The world is too big to save. People often talk about, oh, save the planet, save humanity. It's like, dude, there's 8 billion of us. Like, if I can help one, then that's my life's purpose completed. And if I've helped one person, well, if I can just help one more person, so I'm always after just trying to help one more person. But I think for me, that's been a function of both how poor managers have managed and done things, but then also seeing some exceptional good managers, and how they've
Mm.
built me up, how they've mentored me, and how they've brought me to where I am now. Does that answer your
Have you
question?
seen that? Yeah, yeah. No, it definitely does. It sounds like, clinging on to the good and having
Mm,
those people to help you and to process with and to be able to be in contact with them helps you to balance out and know how to process the bad. Um,
yes.
have you seen that movie? I can't remember what the movie's called, but it's about this guy who's a conscientious objector or conscious objector in the war, and he goes into the war as like a medic. I think, is it Hacksaw Ridge? I think it might be called Hacksaw
So
Ridge.
rich it
And
is. Yeah.
basically, Hacksaw Ridge, right? And when you said about, how can I help one more person, it reminded me of he's like, just one more, just one more. When he's dragging the guys back to the edge of the ridge, he's like, just one more, just one more, just one more. And in the end, he
Yeah.
saved loads of people. But like his relentlessness of just one more, it drove him to do amazing things and have a massive, massive impact. So when you said about, how can I impact one more person, that reminded me of the guy from Hacksaw Ridge.
I watched that movie on occasion.
Mm,
The guy's called Desmond Doss, by the way.
mm,
Um, Desmond Doss, yeah, DOSS. Yeah, um, yeah. I think it's impossible for me to watch that movie without a tear. Um, and that for
mm,
me, I think if you wanted to see on a movie what I mean, what I try and get at with my management style, I think that's a good reflection. I would, yeah, just one more, and it's not about me.
mm,
It's about the people that I can help.
mm,
I've
mm,
spent a lot of time. When I lost my job in January, I started going down a rabbit hole fast, and I went onto LinkedIn one day to try and look for what jobs are available, and I saw just another
mm,
big tech company that had laid off some thousands of people. And I thought to myself, well, obviously the company I was at no longer saw the need for me, um, but maybe I can help someone else. So I started putting some
mm,
posts on LinkedIn over the last few months to really just be open to anybody who wants mentoring, or if they just want to talk about the awful situation about losing your job. Sometimes that's enough just to have a conversation with someone who's been in the same boat. But I've tried to
mm,
also be active in helping people, and so I've got a few people, from the Philippines, China, Kenya, UK, all over
mm,
Europe, in
mm,
America, East West Coast, um, and there have been some amazing successes which has come from
mm,
that. And my preface to all of that has always been that I have zero answers. I cannot get you a job, but maybe together we can figure something out. And
mm,
and and, and in one instance, it was just as simple as talking about the situation and saying,
mm,
"Okay, I have someone to believe in me now." And I think that's
mm,
one of the things I do well. I believe in people. I honestly do. And this one lady, we worked together a bit. I told her I believe in her, and I really did. She did a CV, which blew me away. She had a CV format, and I said to her, "Look, if I'm honest with you, as a hiring manager, if that CV were to fall on my desk, it looks like every other CV that I see.
mm,
So how about we add a bit of pizzazz to your CV, and excuse me, um, not exaggerate, but let's lay things out a bit clearer. Let's add some of the commercial value that you've brought." And
mm,
and that alone, that whole point of bringing value was really transformational for her. So she did all the work. She applied for jobs. She had redone her CV, which was mind blowing. I love what she's done with it. And she's found the job, and it's just so amazing to
wow,
see the
that's
growth and
amazing.
the transformation that people go
Mm,
through. um, and it's really quite wonderful because someone comes to me. and we start talking. And as we talk, I don't give answers. I don't give hyperbole and say, oh, this and that, and cliche after cliche. But they realize that they had the answer all the time.
Mm.
They knew how to fix it. They knew how to achieve what they wanted to achieve. All they needed was some dude in Wales sitting there and saying, I believe in you. You can do this. And it's been very rewarding. And um, I feel a bit like a hypocrite because I'm in a mental hospital, but I'm still in contact with people on LinkedIn, and we're still going
Why?
through CVs.
Why does that make you feel like a hypocrite?
Because I don't have the answers. You don't get sectioned and placed in a mental hospital for no reason. A number of psychologists and psychiatrists have interviewed me, and despite what I thought were very good, rational, well thought out arguments, they've decided to detain me here. So I don't have any of the answers, and it makes me feel hypocritical that I'm trying to suggest that I can help others. I couldn't help myself,
And I feel like,
but
but I think we're not built to have all the answers, if that makes sense. Like, there are answers that I will never have, but that someone else has, and it's almost like, there was this like experiment that they did where everybody had to write their name, right? And then they had to put everybody's name in like a big mess, and then you had to go and find your name, right? And it took people hours to try and find their name amongst hundreds of names. But then they switched it around and they said, Nico, you look for someone else's name, right? So you'd find James, you shout, James, I've got your name. James then comes and picks up his name, right? And for me, this is a very similar thing. It's like, there are things that you have answers for that other people need. There are also people that have answers that you need, and we're never meant to have it all together. And I think that that's what's sometimes a bit dangerous about the cancel culture that we have, because if someone says something that we don't like, we chuck away everything that person has ever done. So in this situation, like, don't throw away everything that you have because of a situation that you feel doesn't match up to what you think it should. Because there's still a lot of value that you have and that you bring, and no one has all areas of their life together. Like, we're always going to have something that we need to figure out and that we need to work through, So, and it's just like, we all have something for other people, no matter what situation that we're in, that we can still encourage, we can still uplift, and what was really nice was seeing, when you were recounting about the lady who was able to find the job, and how, talking about put the value really made, like, your eyes lit up, your face lit up. Like, it was amazing to see. Like, on the autistic subtitles, it would have said Nico is having a great memory and his face is so happy. It was such a beautiful moment, and that was so precious. It was so precious.
thank you for that perspective. That's quite interesting. Yeah, I agree. We tend to present a carefully curated version of ourselves to the outside world. Mine is completely broken, so what you see is just what you get.
But that was really good about your post, though. But that's what was great about your post, was that it was like, I've lost my job and this sucks, right? And that was quite evident that this was something that was a tough thing for you, but you were still like, but I want to connect with people, but let's work together, let's collaborate. And that was an amazing thing. Like, you were being authentic, like, this is hard, this is not easy, this sucks, but let's do something together. And that was amazing. That's why, even like, when you told me today where you were, and I was like, are you sure you want to record? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, mind blown, because for me, that's it's just amazing. It's amazing. So thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. One of the things that's been interesting about this whole process of trying to help people on LinkedIn, I've had a lot of people who were interested, but because I don't charge a penny, and because I actively refuse anything in kind. I don't want people to put my name on their network. I want nothing. I
mm,
just want to do it for
mm,
the sake of them and to help people.
mm,
Um, I've had a surprising number of people kind of just say, no, not interested. They think I'm running a scam, or they whatever. But
Well,
the honest truth is just, hey, dude, I'm sitting here in a mental hospital. I dropped all the plates I tried to spin,
mm,
and really for me, I just, my value in life, like I said at the start, when that I measure my value to society on my paycheck.
mm, mm,
I'm not getting a paycheck at the moment. So what is my value to society? Well, I can
mm,
I can stand in the breach for other people. I can
mm,
help uplift other people, and it might not be very high, that I grant, but just one more. Like
mm,
Desmond Doss says, just one more. If I can help just one more person,
mm,
um, and it's been so rewarding, man. Geez, I started this morning writing a book about my experience, just because I thought it's worth remembering. Even if I never publish it or do anything with it, it's maybe
mm,
just as a diary, trying to remember some of the things that have
mm,
that have happened over the last few months, because there's been such amazing victories in people's lives. So, what was one of the things that's been really rewarding, with all the people I've worked with, is seeing the change that has got in people's lives. There's someone I'm working with in Manila. He's got a newborn baby, and his wife's not employed, so they're having a rough time. And he was trying to get a promotion at work, and you know, we spent some time going through some of his stuff. I was up at 4 a.m. because that worked better for him for Manila time. I think it's an 8 hour time difference. I was up at 4 a.m. for a few nights working with him. But again, it's the rewarding part of this is seeing that when you put just a little bit of yourself, of your energy, of your life into uplifting others, the amazing success and amazing things they can do with it.
mm.
So, you know, I'm here in a mental hospital, but I'm trying to just give a bit of myself to people as far as I go, and I just hope maybe it helps just one person.
Nico, to be honest, it's helped me hearing you, so I'm sure it's going to help many more people. And honestly, I can't thank you enough for being so vulnerable, for being so open, and still wanting to have this conversation with me. Because when you first said it, I was like, I didn't think you'd still want to go ahead, but I love the fact that we've still had this conversation. It's authentic. It's been very vulnerable. So I just want to say a massive thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts, and I'm wishing you all the best. It sounds like you're already on a really good healing journey, and this time is bringing out some really good things in you. So I just hope that the rest of your time there, whatever that looks like, is even better, if that makes sense. As weird as that sounds, that you
Thank you.
continue to get those learnings, you continue to get that healing, and that your book comes along well, and that once you're out of there, that you figure out what you want to do next, because there are so many options and opportunities for you, because you are a great leader and you do lead with emotional intelligence. So in that sense, the world is your oyster. So just wishing you all the best with that.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me today. It was great being there.
My absolute pleasure. And thank you everybody for listening in. And yeah, we'd love to hear kind of your thoughts in the comments, and feel free to reach out to Nico as well. I'll put his LinkedIn profile in the comments, and
Thank
he
you.
can get
Uh,
one more person to connect to.
yeah, I mean, I'm still open to helping people, and even if I did find a job tomorrow, I would still want to continue this in some capacity to help and try and uplift others as much as I can. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.